Okay, well, hi everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us today for this California Department of Fish and Wildlife last Harvest Huddle Hour of 2020. My name is Robert Karam, and I'm the newest member of the CDFW R3 team. This series has been brought to you by the department's Hunter and Angler Recruit, Retain, and Reactivate efforts, also known as R3. As you may know, the mission of the Department of Fish and Wildlife is to manage California's diverse fish, wildlife, and plant resources and the habitats upon which they depend for their ecological values and for their use and enjoyment by the public, like you on this webinar. Funds directly raised by fishing and hunting licenses are used in our statewide fish and wildlife education, management, and conservation efforts. So thank you all. With that said, today we have two exciting panelists that will talk turkey hunting. Turkey might be on a lot of our minds. Many of us might soon be craving turkey. However, before skipping the supermarket and heading out to a designated hunting ground, there's important information to consider. Today, we'll talk about a few of those things. Just quickly, a couple housekeeping items for all of our attendees. For those of you new to Zoom, you can change the way your screen looks by clicking at the top right icons. There are two views, gallery and presenter. And for gallery view, we recommend gallery view when many people are talking, and presenter view for individual presenters. So feel free to play around with it. What you select won't affect anyone else's screen. Also, at the end of the session, there'll be an opportunity for the audience to participate in Q&A. We'll be using the chat feature for this. The chat feature can be located at the bottom middle of your screen. It's the icon that looks like a speech balloon. Please click on it to open the dialog box. You can then type your questions, then hit enter to submit them to the moderators. We'll try to get through as many questions as we can. Questions cannot be viewed by anyone watching. Only the moderators can see them, so don't be afraid to ask questions. In addition, we were recently informed that the International Sportsman Expo, also known as ISE, has been canceled for 2021 due to COVID. Unfortunately, ISE will be unable to provide tickets to those who qualified through their participation in Harvest Huddle Hour series. So we appreciate your understanding during these unprecedented times and hope that you have enjoyed participating in the R3H3 sessions. So let's introduce our attendees. First, Allison is a senior environmental scientist supervisor with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. She has worked for CDFW for almost 15 years and has been a certified hunter education instructor for the past 5 years. Anna is an adult onset hunter who began hunting in 2011. She enjoys waterfowl, upland game bird, and deer hunting. We also have Kevin Vella. Kevin grew up in Napa County, where he was immersed into the traditions of hunting and angling through his family. This passion for the outdoors lifestyle led him to Humboldt State University, where he received his bachelor's degree in wildlife management. Kevin has also had the opportunity to work in the natural resources field since 2008 and has been a biologist for the National Wild Turkey Federation since 2014. So thank you, Anna and Kevin, for being here today to share your experiences and expertise. I'm going to stop sharing, so take it away, Kevin.
All right. Thank you, Robert. All right. Well, thank you very much, Robert. Again, we're here to talk to you about just some of the basics of wild turkey hunting. There is a lot to learn about wild turkey hunting that unfortunately we're not going to get to everything in this Harvest Huddle Hour, but hopefully what we do get through, we'll be able to get you set up and get on your way. And then you can go down the road of getting some additional resources later on to learn a little bit more. So like Robert said, my name is Kevin Vella. I'm the Pacific Coast District Biologist for the National Wild Turkey Federation. I grew up in the traditional hunter role where my dad was a hunter, my brother was a hunter, my whole family were hunters. So it's something that's kind of always been on my mind, and something that the passion of it led me to becoming a wildlife biologist and led me down the career path that I'm on. Go ahead, Anna.
Hi, I'm Allison. It's great to be here with all of you. I'm hoping we can give you some good information about getting out and going turkey hunting. So, like Robert said, I worked for the department. I've worked for the department for several years. I very much enjoy my job and all the different roles I've had there. I also became a hunter instructor about 5 years ago, but today I'm here as a fellow hunter. So think of me that way. And just a little bit of background about my hunting experience. So I grew up in Auburn in the foothills of the Sierra. I spent my childhood fishing with my dad and continued that into adulthood, spent a lot of years trout fishing in the Sierras and was really focused on that. And it wasn't until I started working for the department and meeting people that were hunting and starting to understand it more as a sport, as well as, you know, what it does for conservation, that I became very interested. And I got my certification in 2011, and then I started doing the department apprentice hunts, mainly the pheasant. And then I just went from there. I started dabbling in waterfowl and turkey hunting, and it's something I've come to love. It's more than a sport to me. It's an amazing pastime. Anybody who knows me knows that my mind goes a million miles a minute. I'm super analytical, and I feel like hunting is the only time when my brain kind of just shuts off and I can relax and be at peace, and, you know, out in the woods or out in the duck blind. And I hope that, you know, that's something that you come to know too, and it's something that you can really enjoy in your life, because I think hunting's an amazing experience, not only for the harvest, but just, you know, for your mind and as a way of life. So just hoping to pass on my enjoyment to you.
All right, so today we're going to touch on a few things. We're going to start out with some wild turkey history and biology. We're going to then jump into wild turkey hunting necessities, the things that you actually need to go wild turkey hunting. Wild turkey hunting laws and regs, where to hunt wild turkeys in California, which I know is a big topic, especially on public lands, and then some wild turkey hunting safety and ethics. So some history. Pre-European settlement, it's estimated that wild turkey populations in the US, Mexico, and Canada exceeded 11 million birds, which is pretty incredible. However, due to westward expansion and you know, clear cutting a lot of timber lots, a lot of our forests, a lot of habitat destruction, we diminished wild turkey population levels to historically low numbers. In the 1930s, they estimated there was less than 200,000 wild turkeys. So from 11 million to 200,000, pretty crazy. But due to partnerships between state, federal, and private organizations like the NWTF, the wild turkey was actually brought back. So the wild turkey was brought back utilizing funds from hunters, from a tax on firearms and ammunition and hunting equipment. So those funds helped biologists to go out, trap wild turkeys that were doing really well in certain states and certain areas, and transport them to areas with suitable habitat but did not have turkeys or had very low turkey numbers. So that was a really big program that really ramped up in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And by 2010, they estimated over 7 million wild turkeys were back in the US, Canada, and Mexico. Since then, there has actually been a hunting season. There is currently a hunting season in 49 of the 50 states for wild turkeys, with the exception of Alaska, because Alaska's a tough place to live in for wild turkeys. So pretty incredible. This bird went from the brink of extinction in the 1930s to what you can now see on YouTube chasing the mail carrier down the street. So pretty neat. So we're going to go over first a little bit of field ID for wild turkeys, males versus females, and what you need to know. So there's two different names for male wild turkeys. There's Toms and Jakes. Jakes are a wild turkey male that are less than a year old. And there's certain ways that you can identify them versus Toms. Toms are a wild turkey male that's greater than a year old. They're mature, they're sexually mature, they can reproduce. So some of the reasons that you need to know that is because the differences between the two. You can start off with their beards. So beards are something that hangs off of the front of a wild turkey. You can see it right here with this tom. So a beard on a tom is longer, it's at least 6 inches, which is different than a jake. So this is one of the ways that you can tell toms versus the jakes apart. So tom's got a longer beard, the jake has a shorter beard. You can kind of see the difference there. So 6 inches or less, 6 inches or longer. And that's the first way that you can tell is through their beards. Typically, male wild turkeys are only the ones with beards. However, about 10 to 15% of female wild turkeys, which are called hens, we'll talk about in a minute, do contain beards. So that's a good thing to know. And the reason you want to know that is because in the spring season in California, which we'll go over during our laws and regs portion, you can only shoot a bearded wild turkey, and it has to be a visible beard. So jakes, some jakes that are born late, that are hatched late during the spring season, may not have a visible beard, so they may not be a legal turkey. They can be gobbling and doing all the same things that a normal male wild turkey will do, but if they don't have a visible beard, they're not a legal bird to take. So that's the first thing that you need to know on how to identify jakes versus toms, is their beard length. Another one is their turkey or their tail fan. You can see right here on these jakes, their tail fans are different lengths. So a tail fan, they start to grow their adult feathers from the center out. So as they grow their adult feathers, the longer ones in the middle keep going out, 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 and you'll have shorter ones on the outside. So you can identify them in the field that way if they're out strutting, like that turkey on the left is doing there, or on the bottom left. You can identify them in the field and know that that's a jake. Some states, it's actually illegal to take jakes during the spring season, but luckily in California, we don't have those laws. So a tom, as you can see down here, has a full length tail fan the whole way around. That's a good way, good way to identify. Another thing is spurs. So wild turkeys have spurs. There's this very, very sharp thing coming off of their legs right above their feet, and it's calcified bone. So spurs are a wild turkey's defense mechanism. They use that to fend off predation. They use that to fend off other wild turkeys for territories and for breeding rights. So the reason you need to know that is not necessarily for a field ID portion, but if you harvest a wild turkey and you're walking up to go grab it, you got to be careful where you put your hands. If you try to grab their feet when they still might be flopping around, you can really hurt yourself. And I've actually got plenty of cuts in my hand and stuff from those sharp spurs. So that's something to keep in mind if you do harvest a wild turkey. And then our hens, I realize that I'm not the best at taking photos of hens, right? I take a lot less photos of hens of wild turkeys. So when I was going through my photos, it was hard to find a good picture. But you've got the hen down here in the bottom left. They're typically a lighter color. They're more brown, more drab. They don't have spurs. Very few percentage of them have beards. They're typically smaller. So you need to know all that in case you're hunting in the spring and when most hens are not able to be harvested. You need to be able to identify hens versus toms or jakes. And then on the bottom right there, we have poults, which are just the baby wild turkeys. So when they hatch, from the time they hatch to the time they become adults, they're called poults. One other thing I forgot to mention too that's different from male wild turkeys versus female wild turkeys, toms and jakes versus hens, is their caruncles. So that's a weird name for something, but what they are is their pockets that fill up with blood along their head. You can see it here on this jake and this jake, and they actually turn different colors with their mood, which is freaking cool. So one of the reasons I love turkeys is because you can sit there and watch a bird, and throughout its mood, if it's sitting there displaying for a hen, you can see its head change from red to blue to white, which is just awesome. So that's a little thing I like to touch on with wild turkeys. So we're going to jump into wild turkey sign. This is really important if you're going out trying to find wild turkeys. So some of the things that I like to look for are pictured here. Wild turkey scratching. So turkeys like to scratch for acorns, they scratch for different seeds, they scratch the leaf litter to look for invertebrates, different bugs that they like to eat. So it's pretty apparent when you come across an area where wild turkey's been foraging. You can see scratching in the pine needles and the leaves, that sort of thing. It creates these little bare spots. If you ever watch chickens, scratch, it's the exact same thing. So they make these little piles of leaves. Typically, they'll leave some feathers and stuff around. You'll find droppings. It's a really good way to find out where turkeys have been. If you go to the bottom there, turkey tracks. I mean, if you're looking for turkeys and if you're scouting a new area, I like to drive the roads, if you can drive the roads, or walk the roads and look for tracks, because turkeys are going to cross the roads. Whether they're walking through a puddle, walking in the dust like they are there, you're going to be able to find tracks if there's turkeys around. So that's a really good way to eliminate areas that turkeys aren't, is by driving or walking the roads and looking for tracks. That's probably one of my most successful ways of finding where birds are at. The top right there, you've got turkey scat. So the cool thing about turkeys is their poop is different from one another. So you can see what this one looks like and what this one looks like, similarly to the picture. So wild turkey hens have more of a plop for their scat. Wild turkey jakes and toms have more of a J. And by the way, this is not real poop. This is fake poop, just letting you know. Ceramic. So that's important for scouting in the springtime, right? Because you can only shoot a bearded wild turkey, which means it's most likely going to be a jake or a tom. So if you're scouting an area and you come across some scratching and you find a bunch of scat that's, tom or jake scat that's in that J form, then you know you're in a good area. You know that there's definitely at least some toms and jakes that are going to be around. So you want to definitely scout that area out and come back and maybe hunt that area. So that's why that's important. And then roost sites. So turkeys have incredible vision. They can see color really well. It's like looking through a pair of binoculars. It's not fair from a hunter's perspective. So they have really good vision, but they have terrible night vision. So they have to go up and roost in trees at night. So the evening time, they'll be coming to their typical roost sites, jump up, hit a couple limbs, and tuck their head underneath their wing, and they'll sleep throughout the night like that. So knowing where roost sites are really important for a couple different reasons. One, if you're hunting in the fall and your hunting hours go till sunset, then you are able to actually find a roost site, and you can actually sit there and wait and potentially have birds coming back to that roost site and be able to ambush them that way. Or in the springtime, turkeys are very, very vocal when they're on their roost in the mornings. So jakes and toms will actually start gobbling in the dark on the roost in the morning, about an hour to a half an hour before the sun comes up. So it's one of the best ways, in my opinion, in the spring to find where turkeys are at, is to get up, at dark 30, get out into the field and just start listening, because they will start going. So that half hour to hour before sunrise, I'm traveling lots of ground, trying to just listen for turkeys on the limb. It's one of the best strategies that I find to find where birds are at. And they'll come back to roost sites day after day. They may not come back to the exact same area, but they'll use a certain number of roost sites throughout the week that are usually only a few different trees. So it's really good to know once you find out where those are at. So I'm going to dive a little bit into the differences between fall versus spring. So in fall turkey hunting, which is the season that's coming up here very shortly, food is the main focus. They're going to be out looking for acorns. I don't know about Southern California and the Engelmann oaks down there, but I can tell you for sure that the blue oaks, the black oaks, the valley oaks had just an incredible year for acorns this year. One of the best acorn years I've ever seen. So you're going to see a lot of turkeys that are going to be focusing on that, because that's a great food resource for wild turkeys. And in the fall, they're still vocal, but they're not quite as vocal as they are in the spring. So you're going to be looking for different types of vocalizations, not necessarily as much gobbling, although I've seen birds strutting and gobbling this last week up here in El Dorado County. But typically you're going to be looking for more for you know, some key runs and a few different ones that we're going to talk about here just a little bit later. Another thing about the fall is birds are more likely to stick to a daily pattern. So like we talked about, they're going to come off that roost and they're going to go straight to areas where they're going to forage for a while. They're going to go to areas where they're going to loaf and hang out and relax for a while, and then forage some more, and then they're going to head back to their tree in the evening time. So you can scout and actually get a pattern on birds and set up along their path to ambush them that way. It's a great strategy to do that. So that's a really good strategy in the fall. But again, like I talked about, scouting is super important. Getting out and finding where birds are, where bird sign is, and being able to actually find birds and pattern them is really important. The more scouting you do, the greater success that you're going to have as a turkey hunter. Spring turkey hunting. Their breeding is the main focus in the springtime. So that's what you're going to want to focus on. Toms are going to be gobbling like crazy, trying to attract hens. Hens are going to be out there yelping and you know, looking for suitable nesting sites. So that's going to be the main focus in the springtime. Like I said, turkeys, or the jakes and toms, are going to be really vocal with their gobbling, and the peak gobbling in the springtime coincides with peak nest incubation. So turkey hens nest on the ground, and once they lay a full clutch of eggs, which is usually between 10 and 12, they will have to incubate those eggs for 30 days. So for those 30 days, they're going to be sticking on that nest all day, all night, getting off maybe once, maybe twice a day to go out and forage for a little bit and to maybe go to the bathroom and get a little bit of water. Other than that, they're sitting there. So during that time, toms are out searching for hens that they can't find. So they're lonely. So that's the best time to be able to try and locate toms and jakes and be able to actually call them into you is during peak incubation. Usually happens kind of midway through the season. You'll notice you'll see a lot less hens around. That's the time to go out and hunt. So we talked a little bit about earlier about roost gobbling. That's by far my best strategy of finding birds in the springtime. There's gonna be a lot more yelping, clucking, fighting purrs going on. There's gonna be hens that are gonna be fighting for breeding rights, as well as the toms and jakes. So that's where you're gonna hear that. And in the springtime, toms and jakes are a lot less likely to stick to a daily pattern. So they're gonna be chasing hens around day in and day out. They might be using different roost sites, but they're gonna be in the same general vicinity, the same kind of territory. So it's really good, like I talked about before, to scout and know where birds are at, because you know they're not going to be too far from there. But even though they may not be following a daily pattern, they're going to be within the area, and hopefully you can strike them up with a calling. So we're going to hop over some of the vocalizations before I embarrass myself with some of my calling, and you can go to our website here, nwtf.org, and find some of these different vocalizations. So we're going to start out with one that everyone has heard before. That's just the gobble. So the gobble, again, is the toms and jakes, and that's their way of showing that this is their territory. It's their way of showing dominance and why they should be the ones breeding. So that's the gobble. And then
Kevin,
there's the...
Hey, Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
The sound wasn't on. Could you redo it?
Sure, I will do that. Let's see. Sure, computer sound. Okay, I apologize for that. So that's the gobble. And then we talked about the hens. So hens are going to do the plain yelp. This is just kind of their basic turkey talk, talking back and forth to one another, calling toms. This is a lot of the ones that is the most likely for you to replicate to try to get a tom fired up. This is just a plain yelp. So you can go through a ton of all these. Another one actually that I want to play real quick is it's really important in the fall. This is the Kiki run. So the Kiki run is a lost young turkey that is calling back the flock to try to reassemble the flock. So it's important in the fall because you can sit there and call with this different or this specific type of call and actually get birds to come back to an area where you might have bumped turkeys or might have scattered a flock. You can just sit down and use this call. A lot of times they will actually come back in looking for this lost turkey. All right, so those are some of the vocalizations. There's a ton you can go through, but unfortunately we don't have time to go through all of them today. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the different types of calls. And these are all different types of calls. They all work. It's whatever suits you that's the best. And I'll go into some of the easier ones later on. But I'm just going to go through each one of them right now. So one of the main ones is the box call. So the box call is just a wooden box essentially with a hollow chamber in the middle. And it's got the back of this paddle that actually has some chalk on it. And you're using friction to make the sounds. So this makes sounds like a turkey hen. So this is like a plain yelp. So that's a box call. There's different types of box calls. This is the normal box call. You've got the long box call. And these, I like the long box because it can really shoot the sound way out there. It's really loud. Hopefully that's not blowing up your speakers because that's pretty loud. So those are the box calls. Those are really good ones for beginners. It does not take a lot of skill to be able to learn that. You can sound just like a wild turkey playing with it. And a lot of the times turkeys will gobble to kind of anything in that springtime. So box call is a great way to start out. The next type of call we're going to get to are pot calls. So you can see the front, this is a glass pot call. And on the back, you can see the holes right there. That's where the sound comes out of the chamber. And so you use what's called a striker and use it like the box call, use that as friction against this to make turkey noises. So this is going to be like another plain yelp. So that's a glass pot call. And there's also a slate pot call. So that's like your chalkboard, like classroom chalkboard right there. And again, it's got the holes in the back. So those are the types of pot calls. I was doing yelping on there. I did some clucking, and I did a purr at the end. So those are all good calls to learn. But the main one you need to know is your plain yelp. So another type of call is called the diaphragm or the mouth calls. So what these are, it's actually different layers of latex that are put up against there with one pattern cut out of one of the layers of latex. And so you use the air going through the top of your mouth to actually make that vibration through the latex to make the noise. So you got this one here that would be, that sounds more like a yelp. You put it in the top of your mouth. Can't show you, but couldn't find my good mouth call, so that one's a little rough, but you get the point of what it sounds like. And then we talked a little bit about the fall and the kiki runs. This one I can kiki pretty good with. So what's really nice about mouth calls is that your hands are free. You can use your hands to have your gun ready in case something's coming in, and there's less movement. We talked about wild turkey vision is really, really spectacular. It's like looking through a pair of binoculars. So the less movement, the better. So that's one of the advantages of mouth calls. However, they probably are the highest learning curve when it comes to turkey calls. So that's something to think about as well. And the last one I want to talk about here is turkey wing bone call. So this is cool because it's one of the first known game calls. The Native Americans actually used to use these for calling wild turkeys, and it's just the 3 bones that are in a wild turkey wing. They're hollowed out, placed together, and then I just used the epoxy to put it together. So it's a different type of call where there's no reed or anything like that. You're not blowing through it, but what you're doing is you're making a hissing noise, and that makes a vibration through it to make it sound kind of like a turkey. A lot of people are a lot better at it than me, but I'll give it a go here. So. So, not great, but you get the point. So I actually made this out of a turkey that I killed in 2014. Really easy to do, and it's a really cool thing to have on hand. So if you do harvest a wild turkey, you should think about doing that. They're pretty neat. So that's just a real brief rundown on the calls. Again, I wish we had more time to really get into each one of them, but that's kind of just a good overview of that. So turkey hunting necessities, Anna, take it away.
Okay, so we wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, the gear you absolutely need to have to go turkey hunting. Like any other type of hunting, there's all kinds of different types of gear that you could buy. Some of it's not necessarily needed, some of it's just high end, but just to start out and have the basics and what you need to have to get out there, we wanted to go through that. So of course you need a valid hunting license, and if you are 16 and older, you would get a regular license. If you are 15 and younger, as of July 1st, you would get a junior license. So to hunt turkeys with a 16 and over license, you do need to have an upland game bird validation. If you're a junior hunter, you don't need to have that. So you want to make sure you have your license and it's on you when you are hunting. That's one of the most important things. So next, you need a legal method of take. So there's several different methods. Some of the most common are listed here, which are shotgun, bow and arrow, crossbow, air rifle. And I'm going to talk more in a couple minutes when I go through regulations about the different types of or specifications for those that you need to have. But you know, those are the pretty common ones to start with. You know, with a shotgun, you can get a simple pump shotgun for $300, $350, and be out in the field. You know, some people buy $1,500, $2,000 guns, but you really don't need that to shoot a turkey. So to start, you can just buy something simple like that as an example. So camouflage, it's super important. Like Kevin said, turkeys have super good eyesight. It's very important that you're covered head to toe in camouflage. So you want to have, you know, your top, pants, you want to have a face mask, and I don't mean like a COVID face mask, but a full-on like baklava face mask, and a camo hat, you know, some dark boots or dark gloves, and you just want to make sure you're completely covered because turkeys can see you. You would be amazed when you sit there still for hours and you watch them and they know you're there. I mean, it's, if you've ever been deer hunting, it's kind of like that, but turkeys, I would say, are almost have even better eyesight. So And you can get camouflage at, some of the same places you can get your hunting license. So some of the big box retailers and local sporting goods stores, they're going to have the cheaper camouflage. Or even online, there's a lot of, retailers you can buy from online. And then as Kevin just went through, you want to have some type of call. I think he might talk a little bit more about it, or if he already covered it, but the push button Yelper is a pretty easy call to use. It's pretty simple. And then the box call can be relatively easy. You can just kind of practice at home. Not something you want to sit and practice on the day of, but if you want to sit at home and practice a little bit before you go out, having one of those calls, I think those, you can get one for $20, $30, maybe even less than that. So I think in the beginning, you can make a small investment and at least get out in the field. And then over time, if you want to buy the more expensive camo, a more expensive gun, et cetera, on and on, you can spend as much money as you want in the sport, but you really don't need to have all of that stuff. So Kevin, did you want to talk about then, yeah, there you go, additional gear you can buy?
Yeah, so there's a ton of additional gear that we talked about. So there's pop-up ground blinds, stake blinds, all kinds of different stuff, turkey vests, which are, such as this. It's not something you need, but they're really nice because you can have your pot calls here, your box call here, you've got your butt pad in case you want to sit against a tree, all that stuff, really nice to have. Another thing is decoys, not super necessary. They're nice to have. I've killed a lot of turkeys without decoys. You do not need decoys by any means. They help some birds to see something far away and key in on and get closer. Another thing is all the different types of calls. You don't need all those like we talked about. Some locator calls such as crow calls and stuff. You don't need those things. They're helpful. One thing that's really helpful that you don't need, but I really suggest is something like Onyx Maps. It's some type of web-based mapping system that shows you where public lands are. Very, very helpful. I've really enjoyed using that. It's been some of the best money that I personally have spent when it comes to turkey hunting.
Okay, so we wanted to run through the turkey hunting laws and regs, and this information will be sent to you. So if it's sort of quick, we're just trying to get through the information you need. So don't panic if you can't write everything down, because this information will be available to you. So what's very important is if you go on our website, it's listed right there on the slide, and you can get that waterfowl, upland game hunting, and land use regulations booklet. And that will have, as it says, your waterfowl, upland game hunting regulations, as well as the land use regulations. So this will tell you what you can and can't do on different wildlife areas run by the state. And it has some of the federal refuges that the state administers on there too. And so this way you can know where and when you can hunt, what the restrictions are as far as your method of take goes, your ammo, whether you can ride a bicycle, if you can camp in the parking lot overnight. This booklet contains a ton of information that's really important for you when you go out. So just a quick summary of the turkey hunting laws and regs. So there's 2 seasons, as we talked about. There's the fall, which is November 14th through December 13th this year. And then the spring is technically 1 season, but there's sort of sub-seasons within it. So the general season is March 27th through May 2nd. There's an archery only portion of the season, which is May 3rd to 16th. And then the juniors also get a couple bonus days before the start of the general season, March 20th and 21st. And then it's juniors only from May 3 through 16 with the archery only season. So I've listed on there the different methods of take, and these are basically what's listed in the regulations. But again, the most common ones are shotgun, bow and arrow, air rifle, and crossbow. So the hours you need to be conscious of in the fall, it's a half hour before sunrise to sunset that you can hunt. In the spring, it's a half hour before sunrise again, but it only goes till 5 p.m. And my understanding is because it's the breeding season, that gives turkeys the time to get back to their roost and get settled. That's the purpose of that time restriction. And then the bag limit between the two seasons is different. So in the fall, you can take either sex, and you can have 1 a day and then 2 per season. In the spring, you can get 1 bearded turkey a day, and that beard again has to be visible through the breast feathers. And in the spring, you can get 3 per season combined, and that goes through the entire season. So it's not, 3 per each of these subseasons. It's 3 turkeys only in the entire spring period, if that makes sense. And then a couple other things I wanted to touch on, because I saw people had asked in the questions were, so for shotguns, your shotgun must be 10 gauge or smaller for turkey. You can only hold 3 shells in your gun, which means if your gun's capable of holding more than that, which most are, you have to have a plug in it, which usually the manufacturer provides. And then your shot size can be no larger than 2. And then all shot has to be non-toxic. All hunting in California, as most of you know, is now non-toxic, non-lead. With air rifles, the caliber must be .177. And then arrows and crossbow bolts need to be broadhead, and they cannot pass through a hole of 7/8 inch diameter. And then just a couple other extra things about laws and regs. So no electronic calls are allowed. You can't use live decoys. You have to transport your bird with the wing attached. And I think that's mostly it for laws and regs. I know we're running out of time, so I'm gonna jump to where to hunt. Kevin, if you wanted to advance the slide.
I'm trying.
So I'll just kind of start. Okay, so with our lands, again, I'm going to refer back to that booklet. There's a ton of information in there. The good news is there's a lot of public opportunities to hunt, and there's a lot of private opportunities to hunt, but you really need to dive in and have a better understanding of where you can go and what the limitations are before you get out. So again, you can find all that in that booklet. Each wildlife area has, some require a fee to enter, some require a permit to enter, especially during waterfowl season if you plan on hunting turkey in the fall. Some have dates of closure, firearm ammo archery restrictions, species restrictions. So if you look in that book and you plan ahead, then you can go there knowing what to expect. And then, do know that no sales occur at any of these check stations on the wildlife areas. So if you need to buy a license, you need to buy your validation, you got to do that at a CDFW office or online or at one of the vendors, at some of the local stores where you can get a license. You won't be able to buy anything at the check station at 5 a.m. So just keep that in mind. And then we also offer, I put a link on there, we also offer turkey hunts in the spring on different wildlife areas. It's a lottery, so you pay a small fee and you put your name in and there's a drawing. And I've actually successfully been selected for some of those hunts and have harvested turkeys. They're really good hunts. They're on some of our wildlife areas that have a lot of great turkey habitat. So Kevin, did you want to talk about the other public lands?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it really well. Just a couple things that I wanted to add on. There's like Anna said, these are the best hunts that you can do. It's hard to get drawn for a lot of them, but they're really, really good. Look up this link has the link to all the state wildlife areas and ecological reserves and such. Like Anna said, a lot of them have different rules and stuff, so check that out. But along the Sac River, Feather River, fantastic areas. Same with this one. A lot of the federal units along the Sac River, that sort of thing. And then a lot of the Forest Service and BLM lands. So I hunt a lot of Forest Service lands. So a lot of your lower elevation Forest Service lands are really good. So this link brings you to a map viewer from BLM that takes you through all the different BLM lands in California, but it also has Forest Service lands too. So all that lower elevation stuff, you don't really want to look much above 4,000 or 5,000 feet. A lot of that stuff will hold turkeys. You just got to go in there and find them. So utilize these links. I believe they're in the notes for the presentation. Highly suggest you go through those because those are some really good areas to look through. So some of the other hunts, and Anna, you can touch on this. I don't know if you've done any of the California waterfowl hunts, but I know there's
So
some really good
I've done their waterfowl hunts, which are pretty awesome. I mean, they really take care of you. I think they even have some hunts where you can stay in their lodge overnight and eat breakfast and then go out on your hunt. But they do offer turkey hunts. Again, there's a small fee, but what I found is that the pool of applicants is a lot smaller than, say, some of the department hunts. So you actually, I think, have a pretty good shot if you try to do one of those hunts instead. I mean, I encourage you to do the department hunts too, because they're in great areas, but this is just another option. And it obviously it goes to California Waterfowl Association, which does a lot of work for species and habitat. So it's going to a good cause.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Another option is for a lot of our chapters, we run different hunts, different youth hunts and stuff with our local chapters. Our San Diego chapter has a really good, what's called a spring turkey tune-up. It's a big event where everybody can come to in the month of February, and they learn a lot about turkeys in the San Diego area. And as a part of that, they can put in for a draw to hunt Lake Sutherland right there in San Diego County. You have to get drawn to hunt it, but if you do draw it, it's a pretty good draw. So that's another option as well. And then some private land stuff. Sierra Pacific Industries, they're a big private industrial timber land owner. They're open to public hunting access most of the time. However, during this fall season right now, they are actually closed because of fire danger. So that's the only problem with some of these private lands is they can close it whenever. So yeah, then there's also just written access, and Anna can talk on that.
Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of possibilities with private lands. You know, like I said, I grew up in Auburn, and just until recently, my dad was still living in the house I grew up in. And when I was first starting turkey hunting, I actually went to some of those neighbors, you know, and some of them I knew and some of them I didn't, and just asked, knocked on the door and said, hey, I see you have 5-10 acres of oak woodland, you know, and I know there's turkeys around. Would you be open to me coming in and hunting? And you would actually be surprised that a lot of people are open to it because they actually eat a lot of people's gardens and grapes, and they're kind of a nuisance for people. And so, you know, I think just approaching, getting over that hump of knocking on the door and saying, hey, is this something I can do? I mean, the worst they can say is no, you know? And so if that means going to people that, you know, we're kind of just driving around and seeing areas where you see a lot of turkeys and finding out who the landowner is and writing a letter or knocking on the door, I think there's a lot of possibilities there. I have a lot of friends that have done the same thing. You know, they've hunt on people's ranches, they harvest 3 turkeys every spring season. So that's another possibility. But, you know, the thing with that, like I said, is you got to get written permission, and you need to have that on you when you hunt. In case you come in contact with a game warden, you want to be able to say, yeah, I have permission to hunt here, because otherwise you're trespassing. So that's just the important thing to remember, is you do need to have that written permission.
So we're running a little short on time. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to jump over the safety and ethics part, which is essentially just the stuff you learn in hunter ed anyways. But some additional resources for wild turkey hunting. There's CDFW's Advanced Hunter Education course that you can find on the department's website. They haven't put any dates together yet for the spring wild turkey clinics. And with COVID, I'm not sure if that's gonna be in person or if that's gonna be virtual as well. And then again, the San Diego turkey tune-up. And then there's always turkey seminars coming up during the spring that Sports Warehouse, Bass Pro Shops, and all your local sporting goods stores typically run a turkey seminar when things are coming up. So other than that, we're going to jump into questions. So I'll let kind of Robert take it over from here.
Well, that was excellent. Thank you so much, both of you. And like Kevin just mentioned, it's time for Q&A. So we have excellent questions. Let's start with this question. And I'm not sure if you addressed it, so apologies if it was something you've already touched upon. But regarding air rifles, for air rifles, you said .177 caliber is the only allowed, or is it the smallest allowed? Is there an upper limit? Can one of you speak to that?
Sure, I can speak to it. So yeah, 177 is the minimum caliber.
Sorry.
Yeah, so you can utilize 177 caliber, 22 caliber, and such. Yeah.
Okay. I had a question myself because obviously I'm new. Haven't been hunting or pretty new to the industry. So with regards to turkey calls, is there one you would start with in terms of difficulty?
Yeah, so there was the two I kind of mentioned there. There was that push button one, and that one's probably the easiest one. And like Anna mentioned, it's pretty economical. You can find that at any big box store, and you can actually, you know, just use one finger to yelp with that. And there's been tons of turkeys that have been killed with those things. And then also just the box call, your normal box call. That's a great one to start out on. I think Anna was talking about that yesterday. That was one she started out on. And it seemed to be a great way for a big beginner to do that.
Excellent, excellent. And so what is the elevation range that we'll find most turkeys at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously down to sea level, and then all the way up to during the springtime, not much above 4,000 or 5,000 feet typically. Some do venture higher than that. But when they do go to summertime, their range expands up to probably I think close to 7,000 feet. They get way up there. But I would say during the springtime, I would personally focus on 4,000 feet or less.
Excellent. Now, is there a way that before I head out to a certain area that I know that turkeys will be present? Is there any kind of clues or indications I can check in advance?
To a degree, you can call the land management agency, whether that's Department of Fish and Wildlife or the U.S. Forest Service or whoever is in charge of managing that land, and call and ask to speak to a biologist with them. That's probably your best route to know if there's turkeys in the area, other than just trying to go out and blindly look. That would be my suggestion. Anna, do you have anything?
No, I mean, I think, you know, talking to other hunters, and I mean, you can call like the local CDFW office. There's a wildlife biologist for each wildlife area that's, you know, and a manager that's going to have information on, you know, what people are harvesting every year and can probably help you, point you in the right direction. I think the same thing if you call local offices for Forest Service, BLM, and ask them where people hunt turkeys. I mean, I think just putting in the effort and calling around, looking online in forums, there's a lot of information out there.
Excellent, thank you. And you touched upon hunting on private lands. Is there a standard form for written permission?
There is a standard form, and I'd have to find that. I know I have paper copies of it, but you know, it's just basically needs to say your name and that you have permission to hunt on the property, and it has to be signed by the property owner. And it should probably be dated. That's my understanding. I could double check with the warden because I don't want to speak for them. But I mean, we've talked about this before in the turkey clinic and in other hunter ed classes, and I'm pretty sure that's sort of the basic, you know, just your name saying you have permission to hunt there. And it can't be, you can't say, I talked to the person on the phone and they said this was cool. Like, that's not going to fly with a warden.
Excellent. Those are very important tips. Thank you so much. Just received a couple excellent questions. You touched upon the beard and the spurs. So what do you do with the beard and the spurs after you take a turkey? Are they used for anything?
You can do a lot of things. A lot of people have different ways of utilizing them through taxidermy. Personally, I don't do a ton with beards. I just kind of keep them in a drawer. I do utilize the fans. You can see the turkey fan up there. I'll actually dry those out. Those look really cool. I think fans are really, really pretty. So I like to preserve those. And then spurs, I mean, I kind of just keep the feet. These are real wild turkey feet. And I keep these in a drawer as well. Some people like to cut the spurs off with the leg right there and put them on like a necklace and hang them up. And that's a cool way to display them. But personally, I just like to do this with them.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, another question that was received, excellent question. So how should we cook a wild turkey? This person tried it once at a friend's house, but the meat was so tough.
Gotcha. That is a common complaint for wild turkeys, especially wild turkey legs, and that's actually pretty funny. So I have right here, these are wild turkey leg carnitas that I made today. So if you braise wild turkey legs for a long time, 3 or 4 hours in a Dutch oven in your oven or in a crock pot, they will actually begin to break down after a while. And then you can actually shred the legs. And I like to do a carnitas recipe like by Hank Shaw. He's got some great recipes. Also Jeremiah Doty from Field to Plate. You could look him up too. He has some awesome recipes, a lot of kind of your generic recipes. So that would be my suggestion. Look up those two folks and they have fantastic recipes on how to make every piece of wild turkey taste good. It's just a little bit more time consuming than it would be with a butterball.
Great question. And I have another question here. How quick should we clean a turkey after harvest?
Yeah, so turkeys have a pretty high internal temperature. You want to get their guts out pretty quick. If you're traveling, maybe half hour from the field to your home, I mean, I would say you don't have to do it before you get home. But if you harvest the turkey, say in the morning, and you have a friend with you that you're going to be hunting with still to the end of the day, I would get the guts out of it quick because it's going to start to decompose pretty quickly, and then it's going to start to turn your meat pretty rank from the inside out. So I would say within a couple hours for sure, depending on the conditions. If it's really cold, you might have more time. If it's warmer, you might have less time.
Oh, excellent. And any safety tips on leaving the field with a dead turkey?
Absolutely. So there's ways that people can carry them that's more safely, but I have I do carry something like this that's hunter orange in my pack or vest. And when you harvest a turkey, you can throw that over the top of the bird. Or if you have a vest where you can tuck the turkey all the way down in your vest, so it's not the big tail fan that's up near your head while you're walking around. Those are good strategies as well. Anna, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just say, they're a lot heavier than you think they are. So even if you have to walk, half a mile, it's a pretty brutal half a mile, and you're going to end up wanting to sling it over your back. And so I think just, trying to cover it, or like Kevin said, put a hunter orange flag or beanie or something on it, so that, don't use that while you hunt because you want to be in camo, but you should bring some hunter orange and have it hidden while you're hunting to have at the end to put on your turkey, just so other people can see you, because you probably will end up slinging it on your back because they're heavy.
Okay, excellent. We have one last question and then we'll wrap it up with a quick closing. So one question is, I recognize it's situational and prevention is key, but after an initial hit, if a follow-up is needed, how best to humanely kill the turkey while avoiding spurs? Great question.
That is a great question. Yeah, it can be tough to not have if it's still sitting there, it's immobilized, but it's alive. There's a few different ways that you can do it. I think the safest way with spurs is actually to kind of place your foot on its head and kind of close that airway. It's the most humane way. I know it sounds pretty rough, but to close that airway and kind of slowly stop it, that's probably going to be your best method. Instead of using a shotgun up that close, you're just going to obliterate things. And if you miss the head or something, you could hit the meat and completely ruin your turkey. So that would be my suggestion. But for something that's it's a tough thing to do for sure. But that would be my suggestion.
Excellent. Well, thank you for everyone's questions, and thank you for all of your answers and your excellent presentation. Our time is up. If you didn't get your question answered, please remember you can always find resources on the R3 webpage that might help you find answers. Or you can email statewide R3 program at wildlife.ca.gov. We'll send you a follow-up resource email that contains information from today's presentation and other resources that you might find helpful to you in your pursuit of turkeys. Big shout out to our presenters and the behind the scenes support. Huge thank you to you all, our attendees, for taking the step to educate yourself and becoming the best hunters and anglers you can be. This session's recording will be available on the R3 page under the California Wild Kitchen tab in the coming days. So have a great day, have an excellent Friday, and bye.
Thank you very much, everyone.